So for this speech in this pamphlet, it's named Agile, short and sweet, and I guess that sums it up. But in reality, the title is, well, too long for me to read. Without further ado, let me introduce Jeff Patton, and I'm going to give it a shot. Why today's common Agile practice isn't Agile, and how to think of process differently. The stage is yours, Jeff.
Is that it? Am I on? Yeah. I'm going to quickly get dressed. Don't everybody look, turn around. All right. This is going to be a bit more of a discussion. I like to consider myself an agile old-timer. I was just by pure accident. I started working with a company in 2000 that had hired Kent Beck as a consultant to teach them agile development. So I got to learn, well, to teach them extreme programming. They were a new startup, they were adopting a new way of working, and they kind of thought agile or extreme programming specifically was going to be their secret sauce, their secret weapon, their way for the smaller company to outrun all of its bigger competitors. And they had hired Kent, and Kent had handpicked a lot of other interesting people, people that went on to write books, and it was championed as one of the very successful Agile projects. For a lot of reasons, it wasn't super successful in that the product that got built didn't do well in the market, but the process worked well enough, and it's hard for me sometimes to understand how a process can be called successful if the product fails. But this was one of those. I live in a place called, I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. At least I used to. I now live in Park City, Utah. But for those of you who don't know, the Agile Manifesto was written and signed right there where I live, partly because a couple of the Agile thought leaders lived there at the time, and it seemed like a good place to hold a workshop. After the .com I was working for didn't do so well, I went back to where I was raised, back to Salt Lake City, and there I worked and lived close to a number of Agile luminaries, and well, I got to keep moving or plowing forward with my Agile process, or with my education and my practice of this stuff. It's been a decade now. It's over, 11 years since I've been working this way, and the term Agile was coined in 2001, so a little over 10 years for the term Agile, and I've seen some weird stuff going on. Agile has become this odd, big process that feels and looks nothing like the Agile that I was practicing in the early 2000s. And for a great many reasons, it feels like it's sliding back into the stuff that I was trying to get away from in the late 90s. So that's what we're going to talk about, is why today's Agile process feels a little weird to me, and I'll let you decide if it feels weird to you, and how process, I think, really works, and how you can better pay attention to if you're really doing well from a process perspective. So I want to ask you guys this question to start with. And, well, how do you know when your process is working? And I'm going to do one of these things. I'm going to ask you for a couple minutes, turn to the person next to you, talk about this question, and if you have anything you can take notes on, because I want to do a bit of a call out at the end. I want to know, what's the answer to this? What do you look at? How do you tell if your process is working, Agile or whatever? Any questions before I tell you to go? Okay, go. Take a couple minutes, talk about this, and I'm going to quiz you for answers in a minute. Take another few seconds, wind up your conversation, and then I want to hear from you. Okay. I've put the conference organizers through great pain because I just wanted to be able to write so you could see it. And then I'm wasting a lot of paper by not actually using it. But so talk to me for a minute. It's difficult. I don't want to have you raise your hands and call on you, but I'm interested in answers to that question. What do you look for? How do you tell if a process is not working? If you've got an answer so that other people can see you, if you wouldn't mind, stand up, say it, shout it out to me, and I'm going to get it down. I want to start to build a list. So create a measurement for, what was it again? For outcome. Measure it. That sounds like Goico. Not effort. Cool. What else? When the product is what the client wants. We feel good. About the product or? Plus the delivery and life and everything. Yeah, good. What else? What are other? Cycle time. But so how do you know if it's working? Because you can measure cycle time. Cycle time plus. Oh, yeah. So if it's not that just that you can measure it, it's that it goes down. That cycle time goes down. The boomerangs go down. Okay, cool. Yeah, or yeah, down or stable. But those are if you had your process dashboard, those would be things you'd put on it and watch those. What else? Say it again. Happy people. That's nuts. What else? Say it again. Yeah, they don't pay you to be happy. That's feels natural. Is that what I heard? By the feels natural, it feels like the process kind of goes away. Yeah. So yeah, the process not in the way. One more. It's so I've got that quality of dynamic, and basically there's we find and remove bottlenecks. Okay. We know when it isn't working. Oh, now when I now I've got to ask you, how do you do that? But I'm not. Because it could be the opposite of these things, or it could be other things. There could be smells, which is one of those good old XP words that we can sense that something's going wrong, and there's maybe specific signs we can look for that things are going bad. Cool. All right, think about this. That's what we're going to talk about. You guys are already sort of well advanced. Nobody said some of the typical things that we have a 2-week sprint, or our stand-up meetings start on time, or anything like that. Those are the kind of things, well, that creep me out a bit. Let's see if this switches over. I want to, we've got 4 things, and we end at what time? 5, 10 minutes past? Okay, so for me, I need to really watch that time. So there's a process that we're drawn to, and we have been for a long time, and we all know it doesn't work. And I want to talk about why we keep being drawn to working a particular way, because there's probably some good reasons we are. I want to dig a little bit deeper into how process really works, and I sense some kind of smart, advanced people in the room, so a lot of you may already know this, but then I'd like to make a case for not using that word anymore. The word process is what makes us keep making mistakes, I think. And then I want to go back to the question we started with, and based upon what you've heard, would you change the way you evaluate how you work? If we don't call it process, how would you evaluate that things are going well? So let's dig in. Now, I've got slides, but I want to try the drawing thing here and see if this works. And I may ask you for a quick evaluation after this, and you may say, nah, stop that drawing thing. But let's start from that. I'm going to set these aside because they may be useful in just a minute. All right, I'm going to draw a quick process model, and I'm going to ask you guys, well, what is this model called? That's called a waterfall. For extra credit, well, who is commonly attributed to creating this model? Aliens. So I've got 1 vote for aliens. And another one specifically an alien named Royce, or Winston Royce, which you started to say. Now for extra credit, and I don't actually know the answer to this, but I have it right there on my slide. What year was this model? Oh my gosh, that might be right. He's a plant. So it's Royce, who may or may not be an alien, who first described this model. And, well, what was super interesting is, well, has anybody ever read that first Royce paper that drew this model? Yeah, how many people, really, I want to see. Okay, there's enough of you that know this. And so a lot of you know the punchline that Royce, this was the 3rd model that appeared in the paper. And then he very quickly said, well, that doesn't work, and here's an improvement. When you have these little cycles in between each stage, that's an improvement. And then if we call this requirements, design, development, test, and deploy, there's this other big cycle that goes back from test all the way back through here to requirements. And Royce described that and said, well, yeah, that's a lot better. And he basically went through a lot of gyrations saying this doesn't work for a lot of different reasons. Now, it's important to note that he was saying this doesn't work, and this is when you wrote software with punch cards, and when bugs might have actually been bugs that ate your punch cards. So where he eventually ended up to was, well, that model. I'm just curious why we don't practice that one today. That was Royce's final diagram. It didn't catch on. But what did catch on was this, diagram number 3, the one he clearly said didn't work. Now, very quickly, we're practicing contemporary software development. There's lots of reasons why that model doesn't work. This should be a fast list to generate. Why are the reasons? What are the problems with that model? No problems. You guys are going to... You can't know everything up front. What goes commonly wrong with that straight-through model? Reality. So this is the old reality bites kind of thing. Things change. Can I put words in your mouth? There's no context. What else? What was it? What were you saying back? Yeah. So these are really conjoined activities. Is that right? Design, code, and test are conjoined. They belong together. Uh, yeah. There's no people. It creates silos. Uh, I'd submit that if you look around this conference, and most of the roles I see are represented as tracks on that model. Let's say this again: the tracks in this conference, and the tracks, the traditional roles in a lot of companies have been really dictated by that model. The fact that a tester is a separate person, it might be because that model was drawn that way. The fact that requirements people are separate people might be because that model was drawn that way. Now, we could probably name a lot of these forever, and everybody's been in classes where they talk about all the reasons this doesn't work. But I tend to believe that people aren't completely stupid. I might be wrong about that. But there are reasons we practice that model. There are reasons, even though that Royce tried to explain that it doesn't work, there are reasons we keep going back to it. So there's got to be some really good things about that model. What are they? So one more, I heard simplified management first. Simplified management. And what else did I hear? Yeah, it's a very visual, and well, why didn't that last very visual model I showed you catch on? It's not just visual, it's... Can I put words in your mouth and say it's simple visual, as opposed, yeah, because... It's and we want to be able to do that. Yeah, that's not important, but we can see, well, it's simple to estimate. What else was good about that? Why do we keep going back to that? It looks predictable. It looks that way. What else? Say it again. Yeah. Is it? I worry sometimes it's a chicken and an egg thing. Is it? Do project management systems match it, or does it match project management systems? Yeah. So let's say, yeah, it matches traditional project management. What else? Anything else? Yeah, makes hiring easier. How? Yeah, clear roles and job descriptions. So on that note, when things go wrong, whose fault is it in a traditional in that traditional model? So is it well, tester? Yeah, it's always it's always the tester's fault. But who does the tester blame? So they blame Dev, who does the developer blame? Well, well, design in this model, and then of course, who would they blame? Requirements people. It's a nice blame chain. Work goes down, blame goes up. Yeah, it's been well debugged. It's any other big reasons? It's simple to manage. It's simple to explain. It's visual. It affords us being able to estimate or know ahead of time how long things are going to take, right or wrong. It looks predictable. It matches a lot of our traditional project management stuff. Makes hiring easier and firing. And, well, I'm going to call this, there's a nice blame chain. True? Say that again? It's well, yeah, I think Royce originally described it as needing iterations, but people skip that part. I'm not necessarily talking about Royce's waterfall. I'm talking about the waterfall we keep going back to. That's not, is that why it's successful? Yes, I got it. Okay, all right. Well, let's stop there. But my point is, this is a popular thing, and whatever process we use, we want it to be simple to manage and simple to explain. We want, and we're going to keep wanting this. There's not much we can do about it. People are going to want us to be able to estimate ahead of time how long it's going to take. We want it to be predictable. We want it to be easy to hire people and maybe fire. And, well, we want it to be logical, and maybe we are intellectually challenged people. And that's part of the needing it to be simple. I want to come back to this blame thing. I don't know, do we want somebody to blame?
Well, blame's two-sided, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a blame trail, there's also a career path trail. There's a lot of managers that you don't need in that model.
Yeah, it's manageable. We'll put quotes around that. By manageable, meaning it has managers. And there's a career path, and because there's always somebody to blame, I'll make the bold assertion that it's really safe. If something goes wrong, I can always really point to someone else. Because there's so much blame and there's so much can go wrong upstream, it's really easy to not be the one who's culpable. So I kind of want to point to these as qualities, and a lot of them are good qualities of being simple and being easy to manage and being predictable. And as Agile people, we're never going to be able to get away from those qualities. Whatever we say to other people that Agile is, if we don't come forward with something that is simple to manage and simple to explain, and if we don't come forward with something that people can estimate, we're going to keep having trouble. We can tell people that old model wasn't right, but hey, Royce said it wasn't right. Didn't work for him either. So it's 40 years now. We might have to face facts that we've got to maybe tell a better story about being estimable, but these start to be qualities we're looking for. And one of the puzzling things that I keep going back to is this culpability or blame thing, but safety or personal safety starts to emerge as something that's useful for me. And, well, that career path thing, that's something that's useful for me. These are things that are valuable to individuals. What I'd like you guys to look for, be thinking about, are qualities that a process has, not steps that it has. And I see companies continuing to go back and forth to that style of waterfall. When things break down, we'll revert back to the waterfall. And well, when Agile doesn't work, people are quick to say that Agile process does not work, but then they're very quick to go back to a waterfall style process, not that it worked before. So when waterfall doesn't work, it's because we're doing it wrong. When Agile doesn't work, it's because Agile doesn't work. So let's move forward. There's this guy named Eric Hoffer that said, well, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degrades into a racket. And I'm worried that Agile is starting to fit this bill because of pressures for these qualities that we want in a process. Agile starts to feel more and more like a waterfall process to me every day. So here's how a racket works. Well, this is how process works in general. If we change our process, a manager says, gosh, I've got problems with the process we're not going fast enough, people don't like our stuff. We think if we could go faster, that would solve things, and a consultant comes in with a process, and they've got something ready to go. And the racket goes a little bit like this. We start with a process that's not working. We try a new process, and things still aren't working. And the consultant tells us we're doing it wrong. So we try it again, and we go around that cycle a bunch of times. And then we finally give up and call a new consultant and find a new process, and we keep doing it. So how many people have worked in an organization where the word Agile is banned and they don't do Agile anymore? But they'll do a lean or Kanban because it's not Agile, or anything else that's not Agile. And they continue to go through that spinning cycle. Now, the way you can tell you're in this process is when you start to see, well, I look for people telling us we're doing it wrong or you're not following the process right. And one of my favorite examples of this, and I'm going to beat it up on a little bit here, is, well, the Scrum butt test, the Are You Doing Scrum Correctly test. I've got a bunch of points from the Scrum butt test, and there's different gradients here, and these are the most extreme ones, but I want to quickly check something here. Now, if we're doing Scrum right, we've got fixed iteration lengths of 4 weeks or less. This is where I'm going to need everybody to pay attention. I need to see hands. Who has fixed iteration lengths of 4 weeks or less? Great. Everybody's got fixed iteration lengths. None of those Kanban people can raise their hands at that one. So, then we've got software is tested and deployed each sprint, or each cycle. Who has that? Good. You guys are doing very good. We've got good user stories tied to specifications as needed. So the stories are there, and how do we do on that? Does anybody raise their hands to all three? I'll ask at the end. I think I'm seeing a few. Now, we've got a product owner who motivates the team and has a clear product backlog estimated by the team. And, well, before each sprint, it's ready. It's estimated before each sprint planning meeting. Who has that? Oh, my gosh. I'm never coming to Europe again. You guys are doing too well at this. The product owner can measure return on investment based upon real revenue, cost per story point, or other metric. Who has that? Oh, I almost want to know what business you're in. What business are you in? A business system? So that's, I want to talk to you afterwards and find out how you do that. That was one where most people can't raise a hand. We have estimation errors that are less than 10%. Who's got that? Does doing no estimation count? No, that you definitely fail the Scrum butt test. So yeah, you got to have the estimation to do that. Your burn down, and you have one, and it burns down only when the story is done, tested and deployed. Who has that? Cool. No one is disrupting the team. There's only the Scrum roles for the Scrum test, but only those core project team roles. Does anybody have that? A few. I saw half a hand there. And, well, I'm going to skip the team as hyper-productive because I'm not sure exactly what that means. It usually means they're on some kind of amphetamine or something, I think. Does anybody have a team that feels hyper-productive to them? Yeah? But you already failed, Jim. You could. So Now, how many people, how many people in the room failed the Scrum Bite test? Wow, that's pretty much everybody, or most people. How many people in the room have successful products out there? More people. But don't you understand that you're failing? So this is a confusing thing to me. I know that I'm in this vicious cycle when the consultant is telling me that I'm doing it wrong, yet my products are successful, and I know that my process evaluation isn't working so well when, well, it's evaluating whether I'm following the process they've described well, and it isn't evaluating some of the qualities that I thought were important. Qualities like people are happy, and we have measured outcomes, and it feels natural, things like that. Those seem like the kinds of qualities we're shopping for, at least I'm shopping for. But time and time again, I see people focusing on, are we doing the process right? If you can't quote Einstein, who can you quote? There's this thing that seems like it's going on that we're focusing on the means and not the ends. If we're not paying close enough attention to the point of why we're doing this, and I see an awful lot of that. So let's dig into how processes really work, at least I think they really work. One more time, remind me again when we end today. 10 past, okay. All right, let's see if we can do this. A lot of people have heard of this shu-ha-ri thing. And the important takeaway for me is, well, when we're learning something, we expect simple instructions. We expect to be given something, given a simple way to do something and be able to quickly do it. Once we learn it, we start to realize that simple process, that simple way of doing things breaks down, doesn't apply in all contexts, and we learn additional techniques, and at the re-level of learning, we transcend that. We learn alternative ways of doing things. Now, I live now in a place called Park City, Utah, and one way to not learn how to ski is to go to the mountain and find the best skier on the mountain, follow them up to the top, watch as they move to a black diamond run, and take off quickly down an icy, thin, bumpy run, and say, I'm going to do it just like they do. That's a way to, well, you don't learn how to ski, and you may not come out with all your bones intact or your life intact. That's bad. To learn how to ski, one of the common ways is to start on a shallow slope and to try and do a snowplow and keep your tips together. The goal of learning how to do snowplow is to learn how to stand up on something slippery. The goal of, well, to get good at skiing, the goal isn't to be really, really good at snowplow. The goal is to stop doing snowplow. So when we see people that are expert skiers, they're doing something very different than the beginners are doing. And one of the bad side effects I see in a lot of process is people adopting the beginner's way of doing it and insisting that they stay doing it that way, insisting that we continue to snowplow. Let's put one other thing out there. There's a person named Jared Spool who draws this nifty little continuum. At the middle of the continuum, he puts process, and to the left of that, he says, well, the process is composed of techniques or practices. And then below that, we've got this thing called a trick. A trick are little improvisations that we do. You know, many, many years ago, Kent Beck and Ward Cunningham were working together, and they said, gosh, these requirement things are not working for me. We happen to have a lot of index cards sitting around here. Why don't you just write the stuff you need on a bunch of index cards? We'll shuffle these around, and we'll have conversations about them. And that started to work, and they said, well, if we've got to describe this, what should we call them? And, well, let's call them stories. That's a trick, and it was a trick somebody came up with, an improvisation that somebody came up with that, well, now it's becoming something that's a name technique, and when we say it's included in our process and we do it, now it's part of our process. But there's lots of tricks that that we have inside of our process. Now, Jared talks about the idea of a methodology, where I've got a process, and we'll call it a methodology when there are people that look after it and make sure that we follow that process. And then finally, at the far end, he puts dogma. There's things that we do, and we don't remember why we do them or know why we do them, and not only do we follow them and people police it, but we kind of shame each other when we don't do the right thing. What Jared was seeing, well, he was trying to find a good design process, not necessarily a software development process, but what he kept finding over and over that was predictable is that when he walked into shops that were really successful, he could find shops that had a lot of tricks, a lot of techniques, and, well, their process was a little loose, and they might be a little apologetic for not really having one, and they definitely didn't have anyone enforcing anything. And the opposite was true, that when he walked into shops that had a documented methodology and people that enforced it, he could almost guarantee that they'd be failing. And there's something about process not working when we start to enforce it. It's out of this kind of world where process that we were following that kept getting more and more elaborate and kept getting more and more enforced, that the Agile Manifesto came out of, and I think lots of people know that. I don't need to show more pictures of the manifesto, but, well, what's interesting is the manifesto describes values. It describes what's of value to us, because the people who wrote this certainly did not agree on the specific techniques or practices, and they all had lots of tricks, and they had all invented a lot of tricks that had become name techniques. The 12 principles that we write down, well, I just pulled out what I would call the working words out of these. And in the Agile community, they get used as a lot of mantras. Individuals and interactions, working software, responding to change, reflection, early and continuous delivery. Well, nowhere do I see there a sprint that's 4 weeks or less. Nowhere do I see there an instance of product owner. Well, I don't see a lot of things there that are part of a Scrum test. What Agile describes are a set of values and principles. And the model, or the way process works, and I think a lot of people here know this, is that there are these values and principles, and it's working within those that yields practices and process. But that's not enough. We've got to take into account context. We've got to take into account unique stuff about where we work and live. How many people are there? What are the risks? What's the cost of failure? Are we co-located or not co-located? And then, well, this is a model, or my reinterpretation of my friend Alistair's model. To this, we can also bring in what we learn. We can bring in theories or laws, things that inform us. We know that the theory of constraints is a useful thing to know, and that a system only moves as fast as its slowest bottleneck workstation. We know that face-to-face collaboration is a lot more effective. So knowing that and taking that into account, taking those things into account with our context and the values that are important to us, we can spin out a process. So how we build process is based upon all those things. And, well, what Alistair's oftentimes held out for inventing one of these Agile processes was called Crystal. And the most annoying thing about Crystal is that I have no idea what it is or what it's supposed to do, because, well, all Alistair would tell us was there's a bunch of principles that you need to pay attention to and use those, and you generate your own process. The processes that succeeded are the ones that, well, felt a little like that waterfall thing. They were simple to describe, they looked easy enough, they looked predictable, and, well, those are the processes that we kind of keep grabbing onto. Well, let's see if we can fast forward a little bit. I'd like to stop calling process process, because as soon as we call it process, we start thinking about roles and responsibilities, because that's what a process is. We start thinking about specific artifacts that we create. We start thinking about specific meetings. We start drawing boxes and arrows, and we start seeing if the process is working when we have people in those roles, and we start filling the boxes and arrows. Now, Scrum is called Scrum because it's borrowed from the idea of, well, the term is borrowed from rugby, and we talk an awful lot about software being like a game. And I wish we'd think of it a little bit more that way. We know when we're playing a game that games have very simple rules. We know that we can train, I can teach a 5-year-old how to play soccer, but I know that a 2-day class in soccer doesn't allow me to join a professional team. We know that the rules of soccer are simple enough that anyone can play, but it's the strategies and tactics that we use, combined with our skill, that makes us good at the process. We know that we don't make all those strategies rules. We don't have, well, roles, really. We call them positions. And we expect people to develop deep specializations to be very good at things, but we expect everyone to be a generalist. We expect people to train together and learn together. And, well, we know that if it's not my position, if a ball comes to me and it's not where it's supposed to be, I don't, in the middle of a soccer game, I don't hold up my hands and say, hey, that's not my job. That you were supposed to be over here, and you get over here. In a game, we know that, well, process isn't skill. And I love the old blog post from Ron Jeffries, we tried baseball and it doesn't work. No one looks at the rules of a game and say, well, the game doesn't work. It's faulty because, well, I always lose. Actually, my 10-year-old daughter does that, but it's usually with video games. But no one expects to be good at a game without practice, and nobody expects there to be a magical game-winning process, something they can always follow that works. We expect people to be T-shaped in games and in sporting teams. By T-shaped, I mean, well, this model is used where the top bar of the T represents people's breadth of skills. They have a lot of different skills, but we expect people to have a strong depth of skills as well. And in a game, well, we don't get confused about what winning means. Winning the game doesn't mean we finished it on time. Winning the game doesn't mean we followed the process correctly. Winning the game doesn't mean that we performed everything we were supposed to. Well, winning means winning. It means we got more points than the other guys. We know what winning means, and we know that playing our position in a game while the rest of the team fails, well, that's just not cool. But in a waterfall process, the one that we keep going to, we can play our position and the whole team can fail, but at least it's not my fault. That's, well, what is it? There's an expression we tell kids that it's not whether you win or lose, but it's how you play the game. That's the expression they use for the people who lost. It is winning, at least in the business world, and we need to be focusing on winning. And winning isn't being best at output, it's being best at outcome. It's the software that we build, but what we're shooting for is some benefit that comes out of it. What I keep seeing with our Agile processes, since I've been working with Agile processes, they've become more and more baroque. We've got more sophisticated estimation mechanisms than I've ever seen. We've got definitions of done that spiral into 3 and 4 pages long. I'm now seeing definitions of ready that are pretty sophisticated, and I'm seeing more of things that look like they should be strategies being hardened into rules. And I'm seeing the re-entry of cycles and culpability. Hey, the sprint planning meeting went poorly because you weren't ready. We didn't get things done in this sprint because there were bad acceptance criteria. There's lots of reasons we have now in today's Agile processes to blame each other and get lost in losing the game. And you can't help but keep going back to this old D. Hawk quote that, well, simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. And, well, complex rules and regulations give rise to simple, stupid behavior. And well, in the late 2000s and early 2010s, I'm seeing a proliferation of simple, stupid behavior on Agile projects. And I can't help but think we're doing this to ourselves. Now, we've got until 3:10 or 3, it's now. Let's stop there quickly, because we sort of have to. And but in 1 minute, what I'm curious is, in my head, when I'm evaluating a process, I will look at things that are smells, and I will look for qualities that I'm searching for. If I see lots of focus on details and roles and responsibilities, the quality I'm looking for is people to focus on skills over roles. And I can evaluate whether my process is successful if I see that kind of focus. If I see people focusing on following consistent practices by the book, I look for a quality of toolbox building, of mastering practices and inventing more tricks. That's the quality I'm looking for. If I see people focusing on velocity and output without understanding or invalidating outcomes, I go to your point. I focus on a culture that is much more outcome-centric, where what the outcomes are known, are visible, and we have some way of evaluating those things. It is 3:11, and what I wanted to do was end with you guys talking about this and see if any different qualities come out after doing this. It's going to be a shock, but I think I want to just end on time, on time-ish. Thank you guys very much for listening to this. There's a lot there. Appreciate it. Do we have time for any questions? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything there. I gave you nothing concrete. There's nothing to ask about. It makes it easy. So, thanks again.